welcome to the Slover Library. I thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Wendy Porter. I'm a professor of women's studies right here at Old Dominion University. And along with my cousin Mark Person, we're here to talk to you about our family's donation of the Nat Turner Bible to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Mark is going to speak to you shortly about how we came into possession of it. And I want to speak to you from my side, from the women's studies side, from the what it means to donate such an important artifact. I am not from Southampton County, but my stepfather, Morris Person, is. He's from Capron. Do we have any Southampton County residents or people who've been through? Yes, ma'am, Miss Edwards. Yes, exactly. So growing up, if you're from Southampton County or you've spent time there, the fabric, the narrative of Nat Turner is very much woven into who you are, you know. If you get a chance, please go visit Southampton County. They have excellent, they have a museum, they have a tour, and you get to learn more about Nat Turner as well. So my stepfather is from Capron in Southampton County. His father passed away when he was pretty young. He had 4 siblings. One died early on. So his mother she had to take care of his siblings by herself, and these are very hard times. My stepfather's 88, so if you can imagine the time frame in Southampton County, times were tough. So she took a lot of jobs and so forth. And the Bible had been passed down and passed down. My stepfather, he ended up going in the Air Force, and then he went to Old Dominion University and eventually Virginia Tech and becoming an engineer. So that's his story. And he can't be with us this evening. He's still around, he's still with us, but it's dinner time, he's 88, it's close to his bedtime, but he sends his regards to everybody, and as you saw him, you know, he's probably sitting on the porch right now. So I want to talk a little bit about the Bible and where it came from, first off. The Smithsonian researched it, and they said that it comes from England, the late 1700s. And we had no idea that it was that old. We were very shocked. And everybody sitting right here in the front row, and Paul Munden behind, and Mark, Melissa, they've all seen the Bible before it had made its journey to the Smithsonian. And I don't think any of us ever thought that it was that. We knew it was old, but that old, 1700s England. And it's a mystery how it ended up being here. We're not exactly sure. But we know it made a transatlantic voyage. Somehow it ended up in Southampton County. Now, what we know about Nat Turner is that he could read and write. The stories that I have been told is that his first owner homeschooled him alongside their children, and they thought a lot of him. And so he could read, he could write, and he was very articulate. And we know, being the minister that he was a great speaker. And again, Mark will speak more about Nat Turner in a minute about that. But the Bible has had a very extensive travel log with me as well. In addition to coming over here, I believe it's been passed around the family. It's sat on, from what Mark has talked and found out, the Bible has gone between homes in our family and sat on pianos and served as like a inspiration in the home. I took it to show and tell in 4th grade. Can you imagine that? I put it in my backpack, took it to 4th grade. My 4th grade teacher was like, "What are you doing with this?" Oh my goodness. Just because, you know, he knew that it was so significant. In addition, where else has the Bible been? It was in a safety deposit box for a while, and there had been a robbery at the bank, so we got a little worried and we took it out. It has been to the Antiques Roadshow in 2009. I took it there. We were never looking to sell it. As you saw here, that was never, ever going to happen. I don't believe in that. That's profiting off slavery. That would never, ever be anything. This is a teaching tool and an inspiration and healing in our view. So when I went to the Antiques Roadshow, if you can imagine this, I waited in line. It took forever till I got my turn. They looked at it. We're not interested. 5 minutes maybe they gave me, if that. And I'm like, "What do you mean? It's Nat Turner's Bible. You're not interested in it?" "No, goodbye." So I wanted information, and that was the reason that I took it. So I was sitting in my office in the Baton Arts and Letters building at ODU, and I was talking to my colleague, Professor Vaughn Frederick. She just retired. And we were just having a very simple conversation, and I said, "Let me tell you about this Bible and what my family has." And her mouth just dropped. "What? What did you just say?" I was like, "Yeah, we have the Nat Turner Bible, and I told her the story of how we obtained it, which Mark will attest to in a little bit. She said, you know, there is a museum that's getting ready to be built. It's the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Smithsonian, and I think they might be interested. I'm like, that's interesting. So I ended up emailing them, and do you know, I got a standard email, and that email was, if we are interested, we'll contact you. Crickets. I heard nothing. 6 months later, I decided, let's try that one more time. Well, it was Christmas. I get an email. I get the standard email first. We might be interested. The next day, I get an email from Dr. Rex Ellis. Dr. Ellis is a curator at the Smithsonian, and he happens to be from Southampton County, so he knows a lot about Nat Turner. Studied at William and Mary, wrote his PhD on Nat Turner. So he was hooked. He was hooked. Not sure if he believed me, because we had a very intimate conversation a few years later, and he's like, I wasn't sure at first. So anyway, Dr. Ellis, he comes to our house at Christmas time, and I feel this is so poignant because the house was decorated. It was Christmas. We had the tree up. I was 9 months pregnant, by the way. So anyway, I ended up talking to Dr. Ellis. He comes in. We sit in the kitchen. The Bible is laying there on our kitchen table, still wrapped in this dishcloth that we had. His jaw just dropped to the ground. And he says, I haven't been this excited since the birth of my son. And I said, really? And he said just what this lady had just said. It's very small. I'm interested. Because if it had been a coffee table book, he'd been out the door. So, you can't just donate a Bible to the Smithsonian on your word saying, it's Nat Turner's Bible. He believed me. He did tell me he believed me, but you can't just do that. So he took the Bible, we signed off on the Bible, and I thought, I never asked for ID from this man. Oh my goodness. Oh no. Maybe I should have asked for some ID, but he was so charming and so wonderful, I believed him. So anyway, we had told him, another thing he believed is that he knew the family lineage, and he knew that my stepfather's great-grandmother was a Francis, and that's a very prominent name in Southampton County. So the family lineage lined up. The Bible story had lined up. He knew some people that could kind of back up the story. But like I said, you can't just donate a Bible and say it's Nat Turner and they believe you and just put it on display. So eventually what they did was they had a huge battery of scientific tests that this Bible went through for authenticity. The paper was carbon dated, carbon 14 dated. They DNA tested the paper because there is blood on the paper. Now, whose blood, we don't know. They have never told me. I don't know if it was human or animal. If you read Confessions from Nat Turner, he talks a lot about going down and hunting rabbits, and he put it in the backpack, the rabbits, with the Bible. So I'm like, maybe that could be it. They brought over experts from England to verify the paper, to verify everything. They also, in the University of Virginia, at their library, there were letters of authenticity from our family, Ain Hatt, who had written letters authenticating it. And then they also reached out to the Southampton County Historical Society, Rick Francis, who did in fact say, yes, this is the Bible that we know of. So after all these tests, and then Dr. Ellis said he was sitting in his office waiting and waiting. The researcher's reading off 100 tests. He's like, just tell me, is it the Bible? And they said, yes, it is. It is the Bible that we believe Nat Turner had on himself when he was captured after the rebellion. As you can imagine, owning this Bible, it's heavy in your heart because you want to do the right thing and you want to find the right place for it. And choosing the Smithsonian was, in our opinion, the best because they're able to take care of it. As you've seen, the Bible, it's in its own case. It's climate controlled. It has its own lighting. I was talking to Michelle Norris from NPR, and she said the science behind this is just amazing. It has its own area. So I'm honored that the Bible is there. We've always felt like we were just the guardians, the keepers of it, until we could find the right home. And that right home is the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And if you can get tickets, sometimes they do day tickets, but there is a waiting list. I highly encourage you to go. You feel really good when you leave. It's a beautiful, beautiful museum. I'd like to speak real quickly about the effects of the community, the wonderful people that I've met. I'm sure I'm going to meet some wonderful people this evening after. But Mark and I have just met and hugged and cried with so many wonderful people through this journey. I was so fortunate to take 55 students from Old Dominion University on a field trip. We had hundreds and hundreds of students apply, and we had to turn them away. They had to write an essay. There was a lottery system, but due to funding, we could only take 55. And to be able to bring my students and just see their faces, it meant so much. And one of the questions Michelle Norris asked was, are you going to be going to the museum? And I said, yeah, I'm going to go, but I don't really want to visit the Bible. I want to see and visit with the people and see their reactions. That's what means the most to me. And that was one of the reasons that we wanted not just preservation, was to see how people reacted to it. And we've had so many wonderful people that we have met. Another wonderful person I met, I was leaving Old Dominion University one night. It was late. It was like 8 o'clock. I was in Webb Center. And one of my students said, wait, Miss Porter, you've got to meet this lady. And I said, okay. She said, I was walking through getting my meal, and a lady was sweeping the floor. She was housekeeping staff at Webb Center. And she had heard about the professor whose family had donated the museum. It had just been covered in the news about our fabulous field trip. And she wanted to meet me. And we sat in Webb Center, and we hugged, and we cried. And she said, thank you so much. I've been looking for you all day long. I didn't know your name, but I knew you were here. And I want to thank you on the behalf of the African American community for this Bible, for giving it back to us. And I have goosebumps now telling you that. That just was the most wonderful, wonderful memory that I have of people that I have met. And I know there are many, many more. My students send me selfies with the Bible. They know they also get extra credit, but I get students still who are like, Miss Porter, I had you a year ago, 2 years ago. Look what I just found, and they send me, and I love it. And so my students out there, if you go, send me a picture. I would love to see it.
Okay, thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
And I want to sign up for your class if I get extra credit. Thank you all for coming. This is a very special evening for us. I'm from Richmond, and my family, very heavy Southampton County roots. We have an old family church, dates back to 1838. And we're getting ready to celebrate our 179th year, so it's a very special place. And our family is very well connected to the Nat Turner story. My Aunt Nat Turner knew my ancestors very well. And I put a PowerPoint together. Wendy's been great. We text message, I think, about 20 times a day. I think my bill's gone up too, so we'll have to talk about that. But part of the journey, this has been exciting. I've had the pleasure of meeting many of the descendants of Nat Turner. And my dad, as a child, we have an reunion, and our family is very close-knit, like everybody in here I'm sure can relate. Our stories get better with age, and my dad played baseball, old country ball player, and he always had a good story, and he would fish and hunt and love the outdoors. There were 7 siblings, and they lived in Southampton County, attended the local schools there. And as a child, he would say, Morris got Nat Turner's Bible. And at the reunions, we're like trying to show off our arms throwing football across the field. And probably, we didn't make it to the NFL, that's another story. But Nat Turner's name would each year come up. And you looked at the history books, and wasn't a whole lot about Nat Turner. And we just kind of thought on a local level that Nat Turner, we knew about the insurrection. So as we got older, some of the elders talked about a little bit more, and they started, they knew I liked history. They passed down the books and said, here son, here's another one to read. So I've still got a whole bunch of books, and then the social media, we can read a lot. But anyway, the story goes back years. My great-great-grandfather on the Person side, his name was John Person, born in 1798. And I have to make sure I word this properly. One time I said he had 5 wives. He's married 5 times, so someone looked at me and said he did. I said, yes, I'll explain that. But anyway, his son, so the story, there's a book called Old Southampton, a Professor Dan Crofts wrote, and he said, I paid tribute to your ancestor. He said, he's a very kind man. He did own slaves, and it's a sensitive topic, but I started exploring. They said that after the Civil War was over, they said on Sundays, everybody worshiped together. You know, you were free to go as you wanted. But there was a Miss Hines who was 102 years old. She said in the Times he was kinder than most of the slave owners, and said that a lot of people in the county didn't like him, but he owned a mill pond, and I'm going to show you a few pictures here too. There's a baptismal that takes place, and I'll come back to that, but he welcomed everybody. He said, my land's everybody's land, everybody's welcome. And it ties into Nat Turner. He'll eventually come to the church. So the Bible, if we're going back to 2010, is when Dr. Ellis came, right? And we had heard about it for years, and I think, Paul, we all knew that it was the real Bible, but you take it to the Smithsonian, they do the test like when he was mentioning. So when this really started getting huge, the first thing they did after the authentication, they did an exhibit, the Changing America exhibit, Changing of America. Melissa's been great help with this. She's done the PowerPoint. She listens to my stories all the time and think we've edited, and she said, no, that's not right, and she's usually right. So we take the train the first day of the opening of the American History exhibit. They were going to show the Nat Turner Bible, so we take the train, and I'm thinking about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. Going to D.C., and the Bible, I mentioned to the lady at front, she said, oh, the Bible's right on the corner. It's a main spot. This is the 2012 exhibit. So walk a few steps, and lo and behold, Harriet Tubman's shawl given to her by Queen Victoria is right next to it. Walk a few more feet, and it's Abraham Lincoln's top coat and hat. And I'm like, it sends chills through you. And it mentions Lavinia Francis, who's my great-great-grandmother, and Morris A. Person, and a gift from Wendy, bless her heart. She's very unselfish in honor of her 2 children. So that's the Bible, but it took about 3 minutes to get to it. Everybody's like getting close, and Nat Turner had some good eyesight, because I'm like, I said, Melissa, let me borrow the camera so I can pull it up. So very tiny font size. I did check the Smithsonian, the actual size, we'd said it's about 5 inches by 3. And I can't remember the centimeters. It's 4 15/16 by 3 1/4 width, and it's 1.5 inches deep. So that's what we pretty close. I think we said like pocket size. So the Smithsonian had measured it. The covers are missing, so that's a few years wear and tear, and I'll come back to the passing of the Bible around. So anyway, this was from the 2012 exhibit. In tribute to Harriet Tubman, this is the shawl given to her by Queen Victoria in 1897. And it's at the Smithsonian now, so it's still real close to the Bible. Keeping very good company. This is the current exhibit, and you can see I've got friends. If anyone's there too, we'd appreciate this. We've checked to see. I think they turned the chapters, because when I went, I think it had Jeremiah and it's got some other chapters. I had one lady from work. She said, everybody's getting mad at me. I said, well, she said, I'm on the floor trying to take pictures. They said, we want to see that Bible, hurry up. So it's a very big crowd, but that's the Bible today, the way it's displayed, and that's a close-up over here. And the tribute has the names Lavinia Francis, and I'll share that with you in a second. A couple things, the insurrection itself, Nat Turner, and I'll share his childhood on up, but the insurrection actually takes place in 1831. A few other, it's almost as if the torch had been passed, and the born into slavery was born in 1800, October the 2nd. There were some other rebellions prior to that that were suppressed. Gabriel Prosser, which is real close to Richmond, that was one. He was a blacksmith, and he was later hanged. Denmark Vesey, this is one, Charleston, South Carolina, that was suppressed. Someone broke ranks, if you will, and the difference with, and then there was an Amistad, there was a slave ship mutiny. The guys weren't even slaves, and they tried to capture, and they were illegally imprisoned. So it ties into the civil rights struggle too. I've done a presentation at UVA, so that's where I paid tribute there. So Nat Turner, born 1800, his mother Nancy, they said she came through Jamestown, had colored skin, and she was highly opposed to him being born into slavery. He's raised, in many of the accounts I've read a lot, the Southampton County Historical Society has done a tremendous amount of research. I've met Nate Parker, and I'll tell you a story about Nate at a real great meeting with him. And so the early years of Nat Turner, his original master, if you will, the namesake is Benjamin Turner. And from the readings, Benjamin Turner was kind to him, and I would say he's a very bright child. They say at an early age, he's later called the prophet. He had special distinguishing marks on his body, and if I'm not mistaken, the Nathaniel is Hebrew, it's a child of God. So the early years, he's like any child, he's got a good, growing up. One of the children of Benjamin Turner's name's John Clark Turner, and they become buddies and share a lot like any children would, and they worship together. So as like 8, 9 years old, Benjamin Turner dies of typhoid fever. And this is where his life, I feel, begins to change. So the Elizabeth Turner, though, is the wife. She presents Nat Turner the Bible. It's a little small Bible. And I'm convinced that he read other books too. He's very bright, and I think they gave him access to other Bible. And he was a well-liked child, so fit into the family. So when he dies, Benjamin Turner, if the master of the slave, they could have signed a release in the will that you're free to go, you have your freedom. Unfortunately, that he dies of typhoid before that happened. Then he goes to Benjamin Turner, or Benjamin goes to Samuel rather. I think for the sum of $450, he sold to the estate. And so he's about like 10, 11 years old, said, hey, you're a slave, now you're working the fields. So Nat Turner, his sole source of inspiration is that little tiny Bible. He starts preaching around the area, and Samuel Turner, the times, like 1818, the corn crops go bad, so it's a depression, if you will. So he starts kind of renting them out to plantations and probably picking up a few dollars, and he asks for his release, and it doesn't happen. So this is the time frame on that. So then next step is he's getting older, he's networking, he's got quite a few friends. Everybody in Southampton County knows everyone, don't they? They know I'm down here today. Facebook tells a whole lot too. I'll go down there and they say, how come you didn't come see me? I said, well, I wasn't here but an hour. And they said, well, stop by next time, so which is all good. So Samuel Turner passes away. This is where my family gets pretty involved with it. My great-great-grandfather I was telling you about, John Person, the old church, many of the Francises have been active members of the church. Nat Turner was welcome on the grounds all the time, and it's a little slogan out, the Methodist slogan, open hearts, open minds, and open doors. And Nate Parker picked up on it that day too, and everybody's welcome. So looking back at the roster of 1877, there were many African American members of the church too. So anyway, as Nat Turner's getting a little older, Samuel Turner, he passes away. Then we get the third owner is Thomas Moore. My great-grandmother was a Francis. She marries Junius Person. They're both buried at the church. And her mother's name is Lavinia, and her husband is Nathaniel. I've talked to a lot of genealogists trying to figure this out, so anybody, all you theologians out there, feel free to kick in too. But so the link there is my great-grandmother is the fourth child of Lavinia. So Lavinia's husband is Nathaniel Francis. His sister is Sally Francis, who marries Thomas More. Does that make sense? So the story, Thomas More and Sally have a child by the name of Putnam Moore, who actually becomes the legal owner of Nat Turner. So Thomas More passes away, and then the fourth owner is Joseph Travis. And so the Travis connection, Sally remarries, and when the insurrection takes place, they're living at the Travis farm. So this is the four owners. This is a sign in Southampton County. It's about the insurrection. And when it took place, the only thing I have are signs nicely written, but in the insurrection there, in the estimates, I've heard 55 to 60 people were killed. In the aftermath, there are several from the African American community that are also slain, and I think it should be on that sign. It's not, but that's signs on Route on 35 in Melissa. And if you go there, take some mosquito repellent because I'm still scratching. So anyway, this is our old church, still in Southampton County. This picture was given to me by Ellen Person. She's done a lot of history over the years, and that's still it's a colonial style frame church, just a little old church. This is a modern day picture, and I'm down there each week. It's an experience going down there. I've rescued about 4 turtles this year. They like to fall asleep in the road. The deer come out, don't tell all the hunters, and in the way back in the woods is where Nat Turner eventually is baptized. But we have the picnic on the grounds, and everybody's welcome if you're on the third Sunday if you want to come. Behind the church, this is the old mill pond. If you saw the video coming in, that was where they used to baptize. Nat Turner is very well known around the county. White people, black, it didn't matter. Everybody liked him. One story was a gentleman walked all the way from Suffolk to hear him preach. Right up but behind the woods, it's way, way back. Now it's roped off. You can't really get back there. The property was sold. But the story was, and a lot of the historians have written about it. Professor of mine, there's a spoke wheel right in the front here, right down there. And Nat Turner, there's a white man by the name of Ethel Brantley, and he approaches Nat Turner and he said, Reverend Turner, I'd like to be baptized, and I've had a few issues. And he said, by all means. Well, they go to another church, and he's refused baptismal. So it's pretty cruel, and he knows John Person that I told you about. He says, welcome, feel free, and this is where the baptismal took place. William Styron, a Tidewater native, wrote a book, The Confessions of Nat Turner, and it's based on Thomas Gray is the original book, and he mentions going to Person's mill pond and cease from the wickedness of the world. And he also mentions the book of Ezekiel, and that's where the baptismal took place. Has anybody seen The Birth of a Nation? And there's a scene in there where the baptismal, and that actually took place at the church, behind the church. Nate Parker came down, it was about right before the movie was released. I'd been working with the University of Virginia. I did a presentation on Dr. Martin Luther King celebration. And I get a phone call from Dr. Kelly Deach. He's tied in with UVA. It said, it's a gentleman, Nate Parker, that would like to meet you. I said, what? I'm like, you mean the actor? And a lot of my friends at work, they're like, oh, you know Nate? And bring him to work. His picture's all over, so it's got me some brownie points at work. My boss said, yeah, go ahead. You take care of business. Tell Nate hi for me. But Nate Parker, he had heard about the baptismal. So this is before the movie's released, October of 2015. I think he told me he'd been working on the movie for 7 years. So Kelly Dietz said, Mr. Parker would like to meet you. And I said, well, that's fine. I've got a college homecoming and I'll cancel it. She said, nah, he wants you to go. He knew I like sports, said he'll come that following day. So I thought it'd be like, Nate and one other person. So I'm looking and this is when, right before the movie, and all of a sudden the van pulls up. I said, I bet I have my little flip camera. Huge camera is like this nice camera here. And he gets out, very nice guy. We hit it off real well, talked about sports and jazz, and probably could have spent the whole day. He had his crew. Next thing, another van pulls up. I said, good gosh, I said, that's some real nice equipment. I said, Nate, we got to talk. I'm working on the whole thing. And he smiled, and he actually interviewed me about the baptismal. And I told him, we kept talking, there's a sword of Nat Turner too. Nate, I kind of filled him in on it and hooked him up. He went to see the sword that day too, and I'll tell you about that. But anyway, this is where the baptismal took place. Many of the historians, there was one story, they said Nat Turner, before the baptismal, he said that there would be a dove from the heavens that would come down and land on the head. And it could have been just a figurative speech, but the baptismal took place. They went down together. He made Ethel Brantley fast for 8 days, and he, that's where it actually took place. So very historic. So it's a strong link to that on the church grounds. This, and I think that picture's over here. Nat Turner had preached in this church too. And you notice it's a wooden frame church, and it's, Barbara Edwards has played the piano, bless her heart, comes from Portsmouth, 20-some years, right, Barbara? Yeah, so it's, she can tell when I've been in there, because I'm not very good, but when it's quiet, nobody can hear when I hit the wrong note. She'll say, someone's been sitting at my piano bench. I said, so I fixed that. I made sure it's adjusted. And the music's a real big part of our services. The actual baptismal, Nat Turner there's a place called Cabin Pond in Southampton County. There's an area called Cross Keys. And I blew out an engine on a car. I said, following all the paths, I said he had to have tremendous zeal, and I don't know when he slept. So he's in the fields during the day, he's spreading the gospel, and his most trusted confidants there was a Hart, Henry Nelson, and Sam, later Austin. These guys were very trusting, and I got an email today from a nice lady I'd met recently who's very familiar with the story, and she said that the fact that they were plotting the insurrection, and he masterminded. He was a very smart person, and a few things that I think triggered that I'll share with you too. But this scene, and if I knew who did the picture, I'd be sure to give them credit. But about 2, 3 in the morning, the insurrection takes place. To back up, in February of 1831, and we've just had the eclipse of the sun. This is real interesting too. The day the eclipse of the sun happened is the day that the insurrection started, on the same date. And a lot of people were like, did you realize this? So back in February of that year, there was a brilliant eclipse of the sun, and Nat Turner takes it as a sign from God to rise up against the plantation owners. And they said the serpent was loosened, and the Smithsonian mentions that too in their articles. So the plan is to have the insurrection, which July 4th, Independence Day. Nat Turner gets sick, and so it's postponed, and they've been meeting at Cabin Pond, and it's almost like the Last Supper. So on August the 21st, they gather again, and they plan the attack. And so this is a scene from that. It's Nat Turner, they say, gets there late. very introspective. He doesn't drink. He's real kind of to himself, and now he's taken on another role as the leader of the insurrection. My link here, Lavinia Francis, the scene that you saw from the CBS Sunday Morning, there was a picture, and Lavinia Francis, I'll tell you more about. She's actually, and I tell the story, and like I said, Nat Turner, they were fighting for freedom, and a couple things that I think triggered his life, which is real sad. He's the slavery issue he's dealing with, and you've got 4 masters. You're not getting paid a nickel. You know, we get like 401k plans, and so there were a lot of opportunity. He's not eligible for these. It's not fair. And at the third owner, his wife's name is Cherry, and Cherry they have a son. Most of the accounts say that there was one son named Reddick or Redrick, and that some other factors going on. It could be possibly more, but that's what a lot of the historians say. So the third owner, the way the laws were written, the child would go with the mother. It wasn't like a custody thing. It's like, hey, she's gone away from you, so here's a child. That's got to break your heart. And so his wife's, they're split up now. She sold, I think, for $40 to Giles Reese. So you got to realize, and what you can do? Do you file a grievance? It doesn't happen, so a lot of obstacles against him. So this is my great-great-grandmother, and her name was Lavinia. She's born in 1812, and they called her Miss Vinnie. And she was, from all accounts, and one thing I've known about Southampton County, you don't miss a name because you'll hear about it. So her full name was Lavinia Matilda Diana Rollins Hart Francis. I might have them backwards, but someone said, well, you didn't, so I'm kind of mentioning that. Age of 19, she's married to Nathaniel Francis. Her daughter, my great-grandmother, is Annalisa Francis, who marries Junius Person. So they're buried at the church. So I'm down there, and you think about this all the time. When the insurrection takes place, her husband, Nathaniel, the first family killed is Joseph Travis. And so her sister-in-law, if you will, is Sally Travis, and that's the first family. The insurrection, they gather guns, and it's real quiet. The next home they go to, and I'll show, is Salathiel Francis. Lavinia is 8 months pregnant with her first child. She ends up having 9 children. 2 of the house slaves, and I'll come back. This is a little cuddy here, if you can see. And this is an old spinning wheel, but upstairs in the house, there's a cuddy. 2 of the slaves, there's a Red Nelson and a slave named Easter. They got wind from a 10-year-old child that something's happened at the Travis farm, and the homes are maybe 600 yards apart. They actually had her in the closet, put blankets on her, and save her life. So that, and then they said, hey, she's gone out the back. This is my great-grandfather, and what's going on now too, it's I think part of our heritage, but he was a first lieutenant in the Civil War, and it's history. And this is my great-grandmother, Annalisa, who's Lavinia's 4th child. Wedding day picture, 1862, and he's 29 and she's 22 years old. He attended the University of Virginia, and I'd been in touch with President Teresa Sullivan. There's a gentleman, Dr. Marcus Martin. They said, would you be willing to share this story, Dr. Martin Luther King celebration? I said, sure, and that's where I met another link to Nate Parker I'll tell you about. So anyway, that picture goes back a year or 2. This is her parents, so this is Nathaniel and Lavinia. There's a book I have over here that, they were written about. So they lived in the Francis family a long time. So that's the link to the persons and family and the Francises. This is the home of Salathiel Francis. Probably about 3 or 4 years ago, 2013, the Library of Virginia had a display, and there was a book called The Resurrection of Nat Turner. Sharon Ewell Foster had done it, very nice lady. She had researched a lot. And she mentions, talks about a lot of what we just did. And there's a Miss Hawkins I met who's a descendant of Nat Turner, and Bruce Turner was there, and it was like we connected. I think it was a group hug, and it was like we've stayed in touch, and if I have a question, we share it. I'm convinced a very significant reconciliation, and everybody knows the story. So this home is Salathiel Francis's. Red Nelson, the story on Mr. Nelson was he was headed to Georgia. He was going to be headed to the turpentine mills, if you will. And Nathaniel Francis, somehow they connected. He said, Salathiel Francis would like to meet you. And Red Nelson actually lived in the house with Salathiel Francis. As the insurrection's taking place, there's a knock on the door. He's a bachelor, single guy. And Miss Foster said too, she said, this sure wasn't any plantation home. It's regular. He was a farmer too, and Red Nelson lived in the home with him, and he gets went. So Salathiel, there's a knock on the door, and they say, we have a note from your brother. Puts him at my great-great uncle. And nobody talked about it for years. I think it's significant, and it's collaborative. It's what happened, and he's slain in the front yard. Then they went to the home of Lavinia, and she's saved. This is an old house here. This is, if you go in Southampton County, the Rebecca Vaughn house. This is the last house standing from that time frame, and this is it today. They're restoring it, the Southampton County Historical Society. There's a sword of Nat Turner too, and I'll share that with you in a minute, but they've done a very nice job getting that backed up to par. When the insurrection takes place, Nat Turner, very smart, I'm convinced he could probably out-preach all the preachers in the county. He knew the Bible inside out. And the fact that he didn't have the opportunity, I think Nate Parker said it, if he had had the opportunity with social media, this wouldn't have happened, but their rights didn't have any, and it's real sad, but it's the story. When a lot of the people involved in the insurrection, the Virginia militia comes out, and they capture everyone but one person, and that's Nat Turner. He outsmarted them. So goes on 60 plus, close to 70 days. The governor at the time, John Floyd, it's like probably making him look bad. He said, we can't find Nat Turner. He actually shows up on the Francis farm, and they realize he's still in the county and gets away. And his wife, they think Sherry was still bringing him food. So he's clever, and he's got basically, it's like a little foxhole. And when he's captured, Benjamin Phipps, hunting is real big in Southampton County. Benjamin Phipps is a hunter. The reward's $500, and the dog picks up a cent. So Nat Turner is captured, and the last two items, he has the Bible in one hand and the sword in the other. And so, sadly, when he's captured, he's in jail. This is another picture of it. And that's the home of Benjamin Phipps. There are a lot of biblical names involved. One in the insurrection, there was the old Cypress Bridge. And the thinking was if they could get out, they would go back to Jerusalem. And the Great Dismal Swamp is not too far away. They've discovered now that there were slave camps. They were called Maroons, and it became the place where they lived. And one story was Nat Turner and his close friends were going to go back and maybe set up there. Another story said that he would come through Norfolk and do his getaway, but the Cypress Bridge was blocked, and that didn't happen. When he's captured, there was an attorney, a local attorney, and his name was Thomas Gray, and he's in prison. He's allowed to interview Nat Turner, and the story, they called it the Confessions of Nat Turner. He tells the story of what transpired over those 2-3 days, and it's recorded, and and he's a very bright man. And it's like, he said, well, was Christ not crucified? Christ was crucified, and he pled not guilty, and he's later eventually hanged. But the book was very significant. It's still in publication, and it mentions the judge was Jeremiah Cobb at the time. So tragically, the rebellion suppressed, but I'm convinced, I think they were fighting for freedom. And you know, here it is, what, 200 years, and a little Bible sitting in the Smithsonian. So this is the Bible on a tree stump. In our family, you've probably seen this, haven't you, Gina? That little picture, now the fact, one story, and that little Bible's been around, because we're like the family, hey, you take the book and just bring it back to the next reunion, right, Barbara Jean? So that Bible, one story has it appearing on that tree stump in 1899. So probably, and it's a reliable source, I think Jeff Person or someone was telling, you know, one of the, but the Bible, if you look at it, and I told a few historians, and I said, yeah, this a few years back, yeah, Cousin Morris got Nat Turner's Bible. They said, yeah, right. You know, like, so okay, so now they like, hey, you really did have it. And that's what I told you, you know, you buy my lunch now. So, but the Bible, very significant. Probably a family gathering, you know, had a little cookout. The Bible sitting on the tree stump, there were water stains on this Bible. So that picture, and a lot of the history books have it, they mention the Bible. One story I heard, it was at the old Ellis farm, and Morris Person married Elsie Ellis, and just little get-togethers. So that Bible comes into play in the when they were verifying the Bible. The conservator at the Smithsonian, Nora Lockshin, they take the Bible, take the water stains on that, open it to the chapter, and the water stains match too, which is help with the verification of it. So that's little, trying to think even what kind of camera they would have had back then, so not like we can take it with their phones now. This was an article, this is when it really started to explode. When you say Wendy, there was an article in the Washington Post. This is a Morris Person here, and we're honored. Barbara Jean, his wife's here with us too. And this is Mr. Turner here. In the Bible, it's very tiny. Morris is a very humble person. He had a brother, Weedy, and these guys like, and I'm sorry I don't have my tie on, they'd say, but they were like just true gentlemen. They never heard him say anything bad about anybody, and just very nice people. And so Morris had the Bible, and I think he told me one time, who would want that old Bible? I said, well, I think a lot of people, but you know, we were very respectful of it. He'd bring it out at some of the reunions, and you know, just, am I right about Morris? You know, he's just real prince of a guy. The picture on the right here, so this goes back to around 2010. Then we started getting calls, or Wendy's getting a lot of calls, and a lot of people were inquiring about that Bible, and then the media frenzy, if you will, the CBS. But the picture on the right, the Smithsonian Magazine, there was an article, the collector's edition in 2013. And if I remember correctly, I was getting back to loaning things out. I loaned 4 or 5 of my books. I haven't seen them in a year. And there's a Smithsonian collector's edition, has John Glenn's spacesuit on the front. And it said 101 objects that helped shake America out of 137 million. And that's one of the 101. That's the significance. And it mentions Lavinia Francis in the article, and a gift by Morris A. Person and Noah and Brooke Porter. So that was where that was from. All right, this is Morris, and Wendy and I call him the CEO of the operation. And I promised him we'd take him out to get some seafood. But this is the CBS Sunday morning group, and when this happened, we were the producers, you work on their schedule, dynamic people to work with. The lady here is Robin McFadden, and if anybody watched the CBS Sunday morning? And so the day they came in, we've been working on this for like 3 months, wouldn't you say, Wendy? And a lot of emails. And this gentleman here, his name's Lee Cowan. This is Barbara Jean, Robin, yours truly, and that's Wendy and Noah. You were nice enough to have us in your home. So that segment you saw, it took about 7 hours for the cameraman. We didn't know the Quincy Jones segment was going on. So I said to Quincy Jones, like a hero, you know, I play old music, and then Congressman John Lewis. So Robin said, well, this is going to be before the museum is open, and the CBS is well connected. They're in there, and they've interviewed all the dignitaries. And so Lee Cowan here, it's very time, we show up at 8 in the morning, and she said, Lee's going to be here at 11, so I got a message. They said, he's the top interviewer, one of them with CBS. I said, well, this is exciting. So I'm like, just don't oversleep. That snooze alarm keeps going off. So I pull up, Robin's there promptly at 8, gives me a big hug, and we had our collection out there with Barbara Jean. And Wendy's got a lot going on with the kids. It's like a very active day. And Marcia said, we got some new friends in the house, and they set up equipment so you kind of get out of their way. And we shot the segment several hours, and you don't know what they're looking for, you know, what they're going to do, and you know, what you want to say sometimes is not what they want to, you know, so it's like you're telling the story. And Lee Cowan, tremendous talent. And we were talking, and I said, well, you probably met a lot of people, and I think he's interviewed President Obama, and they're just super people. And he said, yeah, I just got back from a nice home in California. And I said, who? He said, Quincy Jones. I said, well, that's nice. And I think they call him Q, am I right? You know, and Michael Jackson we all know about. So anyway, we leave, and we went out to eat after that. Mike Hernandez, who took the pictures, the cameraman, he said, I'm getting ready to go to France. I said, well, that'd be nice. And they got hundreds of $1,000s worth of equipment. I think he wanted to go get some seafood with us, but he was afraid to leave his equipment. Turns out Charles Osgood, I think, and they were heading to film that. He retired, and they were filming in France. That was where they were leaving after they left us. So I get an email. She said it'll probably be shown in a couple weeks. So I'm like having to check my email at 7 in the morning on that Sunday. Robin said the producers liked it, and you're going to be on at like 9 o'clock or 7, you know. I'm saying, well, I don't have time to Facebook everybody. It's too, you know. So next thing shown, I said, Quincy Jones. I said, well, this must be a different segment. And I'm like, then they showed Congressman John Lewis. And the scene with myself and Morris is like the last shot. We've been in the house the whole day. And originally we were planning a walk. And Morris said, hey, let's just have a seat. And I said, yes, sir. And they're out front, and that scene got taken. And they ran it, and I said, well, Robin, will this be shown locally? It'll be shown a few places. 6 million people saw that segment. And it's like 6 million, so I'm like, Quincy Jones. So I'm like at home that day, and I'm like, phone starts ringing, a few on Facebook. How come y'all didn't let us? Well, I just found out, I'm still waking up. I went to Randolph-Macon College in Ashland. They have to hear my baseball story. So they said, you were on TV? And I'm like, yeah. I said, well, did you have a good Sunday? And so it's like after that, we were contacted, a group, the Deutsche Welle International group, calls us email. And you want to be some of these folks you haven't heard from, but we kept the door open. And this next thing, and it's not like, hey, we'll be there in a week. I said, I said, when do you want to come? He said, tomorrow. I said, well, I got to get off work. My boss has been great. And she said, tell everybody hi. She wanted to come too, but y'all got me out of work today. So Deutsche Welle, and I checked out one of the largest German magazines in Europe. They came to the house, and he said, we need to go to a church. I said, oh, well, we got our own. So go down to Southampton County. There's the lady there. She said, well, I won't be with y'all tomorrow. And I said, oh, that's okay. She said, I'm interviewing Michelle Obama. I said, oh, okay. So next thing she said, that's going to be shown. I said, where will this be shown? She said, France, Germany, and it's going to be translated into Arab. She said it was about 10 million people viewed it. the significance of the Bible, it's overseas. Melissa's brother lives in Stockholm. There was an article on it. And it ties into the slavery movement and civil rights. And next thing, National Geographic, we were contacted by, and we were telling the story. And that little Bible sitting up in Washington, D.C., and it's got a permanent home. So, and this is Nate Parker. I know he's from Norfolk, if I'm not mistaken. The Nate Parker, talking about education, very smart guy. He's very talented. I'm an old trumpet player, and we started talking about, there was a movie called Mo Better Blues. I don't know if anybody saw it. So Bleak, if I'm correct, and Denzel Washington's in it. And so I'm talking movie. I said, yes, talking about Spike Lee, and he said, yeah, he knows all these guys, so that's pretty cool. And this is his movie. He's getting ready to come out. So Nate Parker spent better part of a day in October of 2015. He came back to the Richmond Forum, did a presentation, and the students, he's doing a whole lot of very good things. He has an institute, a film institute that he sponsors, very active, and he's done a lot promoting the next generation. Very talented, and he's sharing it. They're doing a program called the education birthing of a nation, and he's sharing the story of Nat Turner too. He told me it's been 7 years working on the movie. And that's yours truly with Nate. I'm not used to being around all these Hollywood guys. He's showing me here, he had gone to the Smithsonian, and the night of the Richmond Forum, it was sold out. He got a standing ovation. And the Bible, a friend of mine went to Randolph-Macon, is on the team with the Richmond Forum, and she had a picture of the Bible in the center of it. And next thing, everybody's like, they had seen the CBS clip, and Mr. Parker got a standing ovation, and he's doing a lot of positive things. So that's tribute to Nate. I know he's from Norfolk. There's a magazine over here too, National Geographic did, that I've left on the table, and he's quite talented. So congratulations to anybody that's ever met him, and very nice experience. And this last clip here, very significant for me. It's like Wendy said, the day of the grand opening, I was there, Melissa and I drove up, and it's on the way, it's like we got there the night before, and I said, I don't want to miss this one. There were 20,000 plus people that were in attendance. So this is at the back, and I felt pretty good. I had a legitimate armband, like, hey, y'all asked me where I'm sitting up here, and I'm like, so as we're standing in line, everybody knows Olympian Carl Lewis, and it's nice, just nice crowd. The energy, you could feel you didn't know everybody, like hugging and high-fiving, hey man, how's it going? And hey, good to see you. Next thing, Carl Lewis walks right by me, and I said, I didn't recognize him at first, and they said, that's Mr. Lewis. He donated 9 of his 10 gold medals to the museum. The other went to his father. It represents the architect. His name is David Adai. He's from NC State. They were having submittals of who should design the museum. Very talented guy. Anybody familiar with the group Pink Floyd? He had done one of the homes he did was like David Gilmour. So he'd done all these rock, a whole lot of different styles, and they put this together. The project is, it's like 500 million, I think, total. 250,000 was private donations. One very significant, so the day of the event, I'm a baby boomer generation and huge fan of Stevie Wonder, and I grew up, we called him Little Stevie Wonder. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but next thing, they're doing the intros, and Quincy Jones had orchestrated the event with the music. So next thing they said, and we'd like to introduce Stevie Wonder. I say, hey, I finally get to hear him. Came out, Patti LaBelle. Then one of the biggest donors is Oprah Winfrey, and she was up there with Will Smith and just talking about Langston Hughes had done a poem, I Too Sing America. So I'm standing there, and it's Oprah Winfrey. A few years earlier, they asked her what her 2 favorite artifacts were, and she said Nat Turner's Bible and the shawl given to Harriet Tubman. So, and it's like we're still being contacted. It's still a lot going on. But Nate Parker, when I met him, so that's a little clip from there. These are my credits. One thing I'll share with you too, if you look at the picture closely, it's actually a crown from African American king, and one other saying, they said it's actually a symbol of the Great Pyramids in Egypt. If you go in, it's 400,000 square feet. Last the count, it was close to 40,000 artifacts, and the Bible's very significant. If you go in, those that haven't been there, it's on the bottom floor. It's like the third level down. And when you get to it, it's very powerful. It's very meaningful, and I think it's very symbolic. It's reconciliation. I've had people say, why don't y'all sell it? And I said, number one, you can't capitalize on it. It was Nat Turner's Bible, and it's gone home. And I think out of respect to everyone, it's something you can't put a price tag on. It's a symbol of freedom. So anyway, that's my story and Wendy's. So any questions? Okay.
What about the strange inheritance?
They can't mention it yet. Yeah. One other, this I'll mention too. The sword of Nat Turner, the Southampton County Historical Society has the sword. And the picture I showed you of the Rebecca Vaughn house is where their plans are for that sword to go to. Another lady I had the pleasure of meeting, her name is Evelyn Hawkins. She's from Richmond. She came to a presentation, and there was a skull of Nat Turner, and it's being test run and very significant. It was given to the mayor of Gary, Indiana, and it's been returned to the descendants. And the story, it was given to the Smithsonian, Harvard University. They're running tests on it, and it's very significant because it will help. It's going to open up doors with the DNA testing and a lot of stories. And I know Wendy and I both have the connections. I've got emails from folks out in Tennessee that saw the segment, last name person, and some of African American heritage, and everybody wants to talk about it. It's a subject that I don't think no one would talk about it for years, and it's like everybody, it's time to talk about it. So anyway, that's a gift, and hope y'all can see it.